It started as an ordinary evening, the kind that was so routine it barely registered in my mind. I came home from work, dropped my bag on the table, and collapsed onto the couch with a weary sigh. The days had been blurring together recently, each one as mundane as the last. Same job, same people, same conversations. There was comfort in the routine, though. There was safety in the predictability. I didn't know then how much I would come to long for that sense of normalcy again. Outside, the autumn night settled in, a crisp breeze pushing fallen leaves against the window. I could hear the faint sounds of life moving on as it always did. Neighbors chatting, a car pulling into a driveway, the distant hum of the highway. I flicked through the channels, seeking some mindless entertainment, but the flickering images did little to hold my attention. Something felt off. It was subtle at first, a nagging discomfort in the pit of my stomach. The kind of feeling you get when you think you've forgotten something important, but can't quite place what it is. I brushed it off, blaming it on the exhaustion from another long day. I remember muttering something to myself about needing more sleep as I forced myself up from the couch to get ready for bed. The hallway leading to my bedroom felt darker than usual, the kind of darkness that seemed to swallow up the light. My eyes had to strain to adjust as I made my way to the bathroom. That's when I heard it. A faint scratching noise, like nails dragging across wood. I froze in my tracks, my heart giving a hard thump in my chest. For a second, I stood there in the dim light of the hallway listening, but as quickly as it had come, the sound stopped. Silence. Shaking my head, I convinced myself it was nothing, probably the house settling, or maybe a tree branch tapping against the siding. I turned on the bathroom light and stared at myself in the mirror, trying to shake off the unease that had settled over me. My reflection looked pale and tired, the bags under my eyes more pronounced than I remembered. I splashed some water on my face, trying to shake the weird feeling that was gnawing at me. As I reached for the towel, the sound came again, louder this time. Scratch, scratch, scratch. This wasn't my imagination. Someone or something was moving in my house. I rushed out of the bathroom, heart racing now. The source of the sound was coming from the living room. Every instinct screamed at me to lock myself in my room, to hide, but curiosity and fear pushed me forward. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a floor lamp, and crept down the hallway, my breath coming in shallow gasps. When I reached the living room, it was empty. The lamp flickered overhead, casting an eerie light that made the shadows seem to twist and move in unnatural ways. I scanned the room, my eyes darting from corner to corner, searching for any sign of movement. But there was nothing. The scratching had stopped. I stood there, gripping the lamp like a bat, trying to calm my pounding heart. Maybe it really had just been the house. I was about to turn and go back to bed when something caught my eye. The window slightly ajar. I was sure I had locked it earlier, but now it hung open, the thin curtain blowing softly in the night air. My blood turned cold. Before I could react, a sudden gust of wind blew through the window, slamming it shut with a force that rattled the glass. I jumped, nearly dropping the lamp. In that same instant, the scratching sound returned, louder and more frenzied than before, this time coming from inside the walls. The walls. I stumbled back, my mind racing. Something was inside the walls. I could hear it now, clearer than ever. The sound of nails or claws scraping, dragging along the wood and plaster. Whatever it was moving fast, scuttling through the walls like some kind of nightmarish creature. I backed into the kitchen, my hands trembling. The sound followed me, moving with terrifying speed. It seemed to be everywhere at once, above me, below me, to my left, to my right. The walls felt alive, like they were breathing, pulsing with the movement of whatever was trapped inside them. Suddenly, the light above me flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, desperate for some source of light, but as I did, I heard something even more disturbing. A voice. It was faint, barely a whisper, but it was there. A low, raspy voice coming from the walls, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The words were guttural, twisted, like the voice of someone or something that shouldn't exist. My phone's flashlight clicked on, casting a weak beam in front of me. I shone it around the kitchen, my heart hammering in my chest. The voice continued, growing louder, more insistent, as if it was trying to communicate with me. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over me, a primal fear that gripped me to my core. I had to get out. I bolted for the front door, my hands shaking so badly that I could barely grip the handle. But when I yanked it open, I was met with the most horrifying sight I'd ever seen. Standing in the doorway was a figure, tall, gaunt, and covered in matted, filthy hair. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones, and its eyes black, soulless pits seemed to bore into me. It opened its mouth, revealing a row of sharp, jagged teeth, and let out a low, guttural growl. I stumbled back, dropping my phone. The flashlight flickered as it hit the ground, casting twisted shadows on the walls. The creature stepped forward, its long, clawed fingers reaching for me. In that moment, I was sure I was going to die. But then, something happened. A loud crash echoed through the house, followed by the sound of glass shattering. The creature froze, its head snapping toward the source of the noise. For a brief second, it seemed to hesitate, and in that instant, I saw my chance. I turned and ran, sprinting toward the back door. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst, but I didn't dare slow down. I could hear the creature behind me, its claws scraping against the floor as it gave chase. I reached the door, threw it open, and stumbled out into the night. The cold air hit me like a slap to the face, but I didn't stop. I ran through the yard, past the trees, and into the woods beyond. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away. Branches scratched at my face and arms as I pushed through the underbrush, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind me, I could hear the creature crashing through the trees, its guttural growls growing louder with each passing second. I ran until my legs felt like they were on fire, until my lungs burned and my vision blurred. But no matter how fast I ran, the creature was always right behind me, relentless in its pursuit. Just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I saw a small cabin, hidden among the trees. The windows were dark, but it was my only hope. I sprinted toward it, praying that whoever lived there would help me. I reached the door and pounded on it with all my strength. "Help, please help," I screamed, my voice raw with desperation. For a moment, there was no response, and I felt a sinking sense of dread. But then, just as the creature burst through the trees, the door creaked open. A hand shot out, grabbed me by the arm, and yanked me inside. The door slammed shut behind me, and I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. I looked up to see an old man standing over me, his face lined with age and worry. "You're lucky I heard you," he said in a low voice. "That thing out there, it's been hunting for days." I wanted to ask what he meant, but my exhaustion overtook me and everything went black. When I woke up, it was daylight. The sun filtered through the cabin windows, casting a warm golden light on the wooden walls. For a moment, I thought it had all been a nightmare, that I had imagined everything. But then I saw the old man sitting in a chair by the window, watching me with a grim expression. "It wasn't a dream, was it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head. "No, it wasn't. You're safe for now, but that thing out there, it won't stop until it gets what it wants." I swallowed hard, the memory of the creature's black, soulless eyes flashing in my mind. "What does it want?" The old man's gaze darkened. "You." My blood ran cold. I didn't understand why this thing had chosen to torment me, but I knew I couldn't stay here forever. I had to find a way to stop it, to end this nightmare once and for all. Over the next few days, the old man and I worked together, preparing for the inevitable. He taught me about the creature, about its weaknesses, and how we could fight it. It wasn't invincible, he told me, but it was powerful. We would have only one chance to defeat it, and we couldn't afford to make any mistakes. On the final night, As the sun dipped below the horizon and the shadows lengthened, we waited. The air was thick with tension, and my heart raced with a mixture of fear and determination. The creature came, as we knew it would. Its growls echoed through the trees as it approached the cabin, its claws scratching against the wood as it tried to force its way inside. But we were ready. Armed with what the old man had taught me, we fought. The battle was brutal and terrifying, but in the end, we emerged victorious. The creature let out a final, blood-curdling scream as it disintegrated into ash, its reign of terror finally over. I collapsed onto the ground, shaking with exhaustion and relief. The old man stood beside me, his face lined with both weariness and satisfaction. "You did it," he said softly. "It's over." I looked up at him, my heart still pounding in my chest. "For good," he nodded. "For good." I wish I could say that my life returned to normal after that night, that I simply walked away from the cabin and back into the world I had left behind, forever changed but somehow stronger for it. But life, especially one touched by something so malevolent, doesn't work that way. The sense of finality that came with the creature's destruction was false, a brief respite from a nightmare that hadn't ended, but only paused. After that night, I did leave the cabin. The old man, his name was Samuel, though I didn't know that until much later, helped me find my way back to town. His presence, though quiet and unassuming, was the only thing that kept me from completely falling apart in the days that followed. He knew more than he let on about the creature, and as much as I wanted to ask him, to demand answers, I was too exhausted to do anything but follow his lead. We barely spoke during the long walk through the woods, both of us too lost in our own thoughts. When we finally reached the edge of the forest, the town lights flickering like a distant dream, Samuel stopped. He didn't say much, he never did, but his eyes, tired and haunted, met mine with a kind of resignation. "This isn't over," he said. "You've weakened it, but it'll come back. It always does." I didn't want to believe him. I wanted to believe that I had beaten the thing, that the worst was behind me. But the way he said it, with such certainty, made my stomach twist with dread. I wanted to ask how he knew so much about this creature, what it had done to him, but I never got the chance. Samuel turned and disappeared into the woods without another word, leaving me standing at the edge of the trees, alone and confused. The town looked so normal from where I stood, the soft glow of streetlights and the distant hum of life so far removed from the horror I had just experienced. I couldn't reconcile the two worlds in my mind. I stood there for a long time, staring at the town, trying to convince myself to step back into that world, to leave the nightmare behind. But Samuel's words echoed in my mind. "It'll come back." The days that followed felt like an uneasy dream. I went back to work, tried to pick up where I left off, but something had shifted. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was lurking just beyond the edge of my perception. Every creak in the floorboards, every shadow that moved in the corner of my vision, set my nerves on edge. I kept telling myself it was over, that the creature was dead and gone, but the fear lingered like a stain I couldn't wash away. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the creature's black, soulless eyes staring at me, its clawed hand reaching out of the darkness. The nightmares became relentless, vivid and terrifying, blurring the line between waking and sleeping. Then the scratching started again. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was my imagination playing tricks on me, that I was just traumatized from what I had been through. But as the days passed, the sound grew louder, more insistent, until it was impossible to ignore. I searched the house, every inch of it, looking for the source of the noise. I tore apart furniture, checked vents, and even crawled into the attic, but there was nothing. No rats, no loose pipes, nothing that could explain the sound. But I knew, deep down, I knew. It was back. I tried to reach Samuel, but he was gone. I returned to the cabin, but the place was abandoned, as if no one had lived there for years. There were no signs of him anywhere, no clues to where he had gone. It was as though he had vanished, leaving me to face the horror alone. The scratching grew more frequent, louder with each passing night. It wasn't just in the walls this time. It was everywhere, beneath the floors, in the ceilings, even outside the windows. The voice returned too, that same low, guttural whisper speaking in a language I couldn't understand. It was as if the house itself had become infected, alive with the presence of something evil. The creature wasn't just in the walls anymore. It was in my head. One night, I woke to the sound of heavy breathing. It was slow, deliberate, and unmistakably close. My heart pounded in my chest as I lay there, frozen with fear. The room was pitch black, but I could feel that something was in the room with me. I didn't move, barely breathed, hoping, praying that whatever it was would go away. But the breathing continued, growing louder, more ragged. It was coming from the corner of the room. I reached for my phone, fumbling in the dark, desperate to turn on the flashlight. My fingers shook as I swiped at the screen, but just as the light clicked on, the breathing stopped. I swung the beam of light around the room, my heart racing. There was nothing there. No creature, no shadow, nothing but the familiar furniture and walls of my bedroom. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The fear was suffocating, like a thick, oppressive fog that hung over everything. I was exhausted, mentally and physically, but I couldn't sleep. Not really. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the breathing, the scratching, the voice. It followed me everywhere, a constant presence that I couldn't escape. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that it was just a trauma, but deep down, I knew the truth. It was real. The creature was still hunting me. Things escalated quickly after that. The incidents became more frequent, more violent. One night, as I was sitting in the living room, trying to distract myself with the television, the power went out. The screen flickered once before plunging the room into complete darkness. At first, I thought it was just a normal outage, but then I heard the scratching, louder than ever, like nails being dragged across a chalkboard. I grabbed my phone, using the flashlight to guide my way through the house. But the moment I stepped into the hallway, the air turned cold, unnaturally cold. My breath came out in visible puffs as the temperature dropped rapidly. Then the voice came again. It was louder now, more distinct, but still in that same twisted, guttural language. It echoed through the walls, a sinister whisper that sent shivers down my spine. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment I saw just a glimpse, but enough to send my heart into a panic frenzy. The creature was standing at the end of the hallway, its black eyes staring right at me. I screamed and ran, but the thing was fast. I could hear its claws scraping against the floor as it chased me. I slammed the door to my bedroom and threw myself against it, bracing it with my body. The door rattled violently as the creature slammed against it, its growls low and menacing. I didn't know how long I could hold it off. My arms were shaking, my whole body trembling with fear and exhaustion. Then, as quickly as it had started, the assault on the door stopped. I held my breath, listening. The scratching, the growling, the voice, all of it was gone. The silence was deafening, almost worse than the noise itself. I waited for what felt like an eternity before I dared to move. Slowly, cautiously, I inched toward the door and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. I opened the door, just a crack, and peeked into the hallway. It was empty, the darkness still and quiet, but I knew better than to trust it. The creature was out there, somewhere, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. I couldn't keep living like this. I had to do something, but I didn't know what. I couldn't fight it alone, not like this. I needed help. That's when I remembered the journal. Back when I first met Samuel, during those brief few days at the cabin, he had mentioned a book, an old journal passed down through his family. It had been left to him by his grandfather, who had also encountered the creature many years ago. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now it seemed like my only chance. I made my way back to the cabin the next morning, determined to find the journal. The walk through the woods felt different this time, darker, more oppressive, as if the trees themselves were closing in on me. The cabin looked abandoned, just as it had before, but I knew Samuel wouldn't have left without taking the journal. It had to be here, somewhere. The cabin was small and sparsely furnished, with only a few pieces of worn furniture and a fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in years. I searched every corner, tearing through drawers and cupboards, but there was no sign of the journal. Frustration bubbled up inside me as I searched the old bookshelf, running my fingers over the spines of dusty, forgotten books. Just as I was about to give up, I saw a small, leather-bound book tucked away at the very back of the shelf. It was old, the cover cracked and worn, but the moment I touched it, I knew it was what I had been looking for. I sat down at the small wooden table and opened the journal. The pages were yellowed with age, filled with handwritten notes in a script that was difficult to read. But as I flipped through the pages, I found what I was looking for: detailed accounts of the creature, its origins, its weaknesses. According to the journal, the creature referred to only as the Stalker was an ancient being, one that had been terrorizing families for generations. It fed on fear, growing stronger the more it was feared. The journal described how it would latch onto a victim, haunting them relentlessly until it drove them to madness or death. But there was a way to stop it. Samuel's grandfather had written about a ritual, one that could trap the creature and banish it for good. It was dangerous, and it required a blood sacrifice. The person performing the ritual had to be willing to give up something precious, something of great personal value, to seal the creature away. I wasn't sure if I could do it. I wasn't even sure if it would work. But I didn't have a choice. If I didn't stop the creature, it would eventually kill me. I gathered the items I needed for the ritual: salt, candles, a silver knife, and made my way back to the house. My hands were shaking as I prepared everything, setting up the ritual in the center of the living room. The air in the house was thick with tension, and I could feel the creature watching me, lurking in the shadows. As I began the incantation from the journal, the temperature in the room dropped again, and the familiar scratching sound echoed through the walls. The creature was coming. I forced myself to keep going, chanting the words in the ancient language, even as the walls shook and the lights flickered. The creature's growls grew louder, more violent, as it realized what I was doing. Suddenly, it appeared, its black eyes glowing with rage. It lunged at me, its claws outstretched, but I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. With a final, desperate cry, I completed the ritual, slashing my palm with the silver knife and letting my blood drip onto the circle I had drawn on the floor. The creature let out a horrific scream as it was pulled into the circle, its body writhing and twisting as it was sucked into the void. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The room was silent. The air was still. I collapsed onto the floor, tears streaming down my face, my body trembling with exhaustion. It was over. The creature was gone, for good this time. It's been weeks since that night, and my life has slowly returned to something resembling normal. The nightmares have stopped, and the house no longer feels haunted by an unseen presence. I still think about Samuel sometimes, wonder where he is, if he's still out there somewhere, fighting his own battles. But I've learned to accept that some things don't have clear answers. The world is stranger than I ever imagined, and there are things out there, things in the dark, that we may never fully understand. All I know is that I survived, and for now, that's enough.